Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com. Well, we have done talks about Britten conducting his own operas, all of them, and we've done talks about, well, almost all of them. Oh, never mind. Most of them. And we've done talks about Britten the performer, and now we're going to do Benjamin Britten, the other opera box, because there is another opera box. It's now on Erato, although it was on a variety of EMI and affiliated labels when these recordings originally came out. And you get, here you go, Paul Bunyan, Peter Grimes, The Rape of Lucretia, Billy Budd, The Turn of the Screw, and A Midsummer Night's Dream with various people. Now, let's just say it. On the whole, these are not as good as Britten's own recordings. They really aren't. And there are now the possibilities of other Britten opera boxes because they've been done now quite thoroughly. I mean, Chandos has a wonderful series of Britten operas, and there were a whole bunch of them done on Collins Classics that are now on Naxos that are absolutely first rate. So there's plenty of choice in terms of Britten operas. Should you get this box? Well, I propose to let you know. So let's dive right in and see what we get. Let's start with Paul Bunyan. This is one of the first releases on Virgin, when Virgin was its own label, before EMI sucked it up, and then Warner sucked up EMI, and everybody was sucking up to everybody, or there's a lot of sucking going on. Let's put it that way. This is a wonderful performance. A wonderful performance. It's with the Plymouth Music Series under Philip Brunel. And oh my goodness, they do it fabulously. And it was a premiere recording. Since then, there have been some others, particularly one on Chandos, I believe. But Paul Bunyan is a lot of fun. It's more like a musical than it is an opera. It doesn't really have a plot. And the other thing about it that's a little bit weird is that Paul Bunyan never shows up. He's an offstage spoken voice, which makes things a little bit more complicated. You know, Blue the Ox is the major singing role. I'm just kidding. But seriously, I'm not sure how stage-worthy the whole thing is, but Britten wrote it during his early years in America, during the Second World War, and it's just before Peter Grimes. It's terrific. It's wonderful music to just listen to. And this is a wonderful performance of it. So we're starting off with a bang. Unfortunately, from there, the bang tends to fizzle. And fizzling it does, first with Peter Grimes. Now, this looks terrific on paper. You've got Anthony Rolfe Johnson as Peter, and Felicity Lott as Ellen, and Thomas Allen as Balstrode, and Patricia Payne as Auntie. She's sort of, her voice is a little unstable. And Sarah Walker as Mrs. Sedley. I love Mrs. Sedley. And the two nieces are perfectly fine. It's a really, really good cast. A really strong cast. What's the problem then? It's Covent Garden. They know how to do this stuff. They did a really bang-up job for Colin Davis. Unfortunately, the conductor is not Colin Davis. The conductor is Bernard Haitink. And Bernard Haitink is just frickin' boring. I'm sorry, he's just dull. He's dull in this music. He was dull in Vaughan Williams. And I remember reading the reviews. You know, it was just, I just have to say this. I will never understand why the English press always went bonkers whenever Haitink took on an English work. Maybe it was because he could conduct it even more boringly than most English people conducted it. But in the case of Britten, we have Britten's own performances, and Britten was not a dull English conductor of his own music. There were plenty of other dull English conductors willing to do it. And Haitink, he's just droopy. Droopy! It's all so soft-edged. It's so disappointing. It's so sad. And Rolfe Johnson, I mean, he's good. He's very good. I think he could have used a little bit more edge, a little bit more anger, maybe a little bit more insanity. See, Peter Pears was also a very, sort of educated and classy Peter Grimes, unlike John Vickers, who was a hoodlum. John Vickers is just a thug. Britten hated John Vickers' performance of Peter Grimes because he was just a thug, but just coarse and, you know, much closer to what the character seems to have been. But Peter Pears had that edge to his voice and that always sort of hovering on the verge of a nervous breakdown kind of tone. And Ralph Johnson doesn't have that. He sings very beautifully. Peter needs to have more roughness. And Haitink needs to have more roughness. And so I find this disappointing. And there are plenty of good Peter Grimeses out now. Aside from Colin Davis, you know, there's the new one on Chandos. Who conducted it? Gardner conducted it, not John Elliott, the other one. And it's really terrific. Smoking. And Hickox's Peter Grimes was excellent. I mean, there's just no shortage of Peter Grimeses. We do not need this one. So, that's a sad one. Next, the Rape of Lucrezia. Yes, the Rape of Lucrezia. Now, this is excellent. It's with Oliver Knussen, who I just was such a wonderful conductor of everything contemporary, and Britten too. And what they should have put in here as well was The Prince of the Pagodas, which was also on Virgin. It's still the only complete recording of the ballet, which is Britain's largest and most colorful orchestral work, and it should have been in here. I know it's not an opera, but who cares? It's a theatrical work. It should have been there. Anyway, it's not. But this is a very, very fine Rape of Lucretia. You've got Ian Bostridge as the male chorus. See, it's a perfect role for Bostridge because you don't have to do anything. You know, you just stand there and sing. And let's see, Susan Gritton is the female chorus. And let's see, who are the major people? Tarquinius is Peter Coleman Wright. And where's Lucretia? Oh, here she is. Angelina Kirschlager, who's really, I like her. I like the way she sings. This is a problematic opera. It's a problematic opera because although the music is gorgeous, it's fabulous music, the way that the plot is framed with this, Jesus keeps popping in. And Jesus has nothing to do with Lucretia or her rape. And the way that they frame the commentary, the choruses who are, you know, devoutly Christian, while the whole thing is Roman, is weird. It's just weird. It doesn't make sense dramatically or logically, for example. But once you accept that, it is a wonderful, wonderful piece. So, and this is a beautiful performance of it under Oliver Knussen. So if you like it, go for it. I have no problem with it. Billy Budd. Oh, this is the big frustrating thing in the entire set. This is the one, it's conducted by Daniel Harding. Now, Harding, who I have had very, very tough things to say about, does a fantastic job as a conductor. It's one of the best things I've ever heard him do. Problem is the cast. The cast just is all wrong. It's just all wrong. First of all, you've got Ian Bostridge as Captain Vere. I mean, no way is Ian Bostridge a Captain Vere. He sounds like a 12-year-old. He's a kid, and he's a leader singer. I know Piers was a leader singer too, but again, Piers had the voice. Bostridge is just tiny of voice and unbelievable. You're just not going to believe that this kid is in charge of a ship and that anyone is going to pay any attention to him or give him any respect. He just doesn't have it. And Billy Budd is Nathan Gunn, who's quite good. Give Gunn credit for Billy Budd. The problem, the real problem, the super duper problem, aside from Mr. Flint, I think, who's that? Jonathan Lamalu. Yeah, he's awful. But even more awful is the Claggart of Gideon Sachs. Gideon Sachs has the most awful voice for Claggart I have ever heard. Claggart has to be a genuine bass. He has to have a dark, deep voice. For Britten writes some hellacious low notes. I mean, at the end of his aria, you know, when he's like, I, John Claggart, Master of Arms aboard the Indomitable, have you in my power, and I will destroy you. You know what I mean? It's got to go down into the blackest pit of hell. Sachs has no voice. His voice just disappears, just like mine did. I mean, mine might have been even a little better. I don't know. I mean, he's just terrible. Terrible, 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 unbelievable bad singing. And that kills the performance. I mean, it just kills the performance. Two of the main characters, Captain Vere and Claggart, suck. I mean, The rest of it just hardly matters. In spite of splendid conducting from Harding, I mean, the big build-up to the firing at the French ship at the beginning of the second act, it's all great. But what makes this even more frustrating from a programming point of view is that Erato has a splendid Billy Budd. That's Kent Nagano's version of the original version of the opera, the original 3-act version, which is longer by a goodly bit than this 2-act revision, which is the standard form of the opera. So they should have given us both, first of all. And if they didn't want to give us both, if they had to choose, they should have picked the Nagano. It's just a better performance of Billy Budd all around. And it would have made the whole set more interesting because you would have had that singleton performance. And it was actually on Erato from the beginning. Go figure. Very, very dumb programming. And it's just a shame. Okay. So what's next? Let's see who's next. The Turn of the Screw with the Mahler Chamber Orchestra and Daniel Harding. Now, if Billy Budd was the best thing that Harding ever did, then this Turn of the Screw is one of the worst. I got to tell you, he conducts like he's in a coma. It's a completely characterless, featureless performance with no color and no theatricality. I mean, this is one of the greatest operas of the 20th century, hands down. I mean, the Turn of the Screw is just a shrieking, flaming masterpiece. And again, there are some very good performances out there. I mean, Colin Davis was very good, even though the video was kind of off. I mean, not only was the photography off, but the voices and the soundtrack didn't quite match either, which was very, very strange. You'd see, "I have been frightened." It's right. It was very, very odd. It looked like the Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, with the Asian guy whose voice and the voiceover didn't sync with the lips moving. That's what that looked like. But no, there are other very, very fine performances of the Turn of the Screw, not least of which is Britten's own. And this one also suffers from some casting problems. And again, Ian Bostridge. Ian Bostridge is Peter Quint. Totally unthreatening. Totally. I mean, he makes a meal of the opening narration, which should be a simple narration. But his bewitching of Miles she's not going to be afraid of this guy. There's nothing ghostly about him. And as Miss Jessel is who's this? Oh, Vivian Tierney. Yeah, she sounds very much like Joan Rogers, the governess. So in the scene with Miss Jessel and the governess, she really doesn't. It sounds like the same person is singing to herself. It's just the wrong kind of voice. Miss Jessel has to have this deep alto voice. When she sings there going, "Here my tragedy began." Oh, I mean, it's such a great scene. Such a great scene, but you need a woman with a really morose and heavy voice, and she just doesn't have it. And then there's Harding, who conducts as though, he doesn't care what's going on at all. Maybe because the singers were just totally uninspiring. I don't know. The result is that the opera is totally uninspiring. So that's not so hot. And then we get, A Midsummer Night's Dream with Hickox. Excellent. It's excellent. Okay, I know we have James Bowman as Oberon, because James Bowman is, the only countertenor in the world. There was this bunch of Britten countertenors who did this stuff. And, okay, he's okay. I mean, I can't stand his voice, but that's me. The performance itself, Lillian Watson is quite fine, and Puck is Dexter Fletcher. Puck is a boy with a trumpet and a snare drum. So he doesn't have to sing particularly. And then we've got, all these other people who, Della Jones and Jill Gomez and Norman Bailey, and they're fine. They're fine. Midsummer Night's Dream is an opera that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. It really is magical. I mean, where it's supposed to be magical, and it's lots of fun. And it's based on Shakespeare's original play, which was just cut down to size without the verses changed around. That probably was a mistake. Probably would have been better to have a librettist do a new libretto, but of course you can't because it's Shakespeare and it's an English opera, and everybody would get all huffy. They get all huffy with the, they're Shakespeare. Shakespeare wrote that, the British wrote that. It makes any goddamn difference. What matters is whether the opera works as theater on stage, with whatever they're saying. You can't make out the words half the time. Anyway, But the score is wonderful. I mean, it's wonderful music. It's lots of fun. And, and this is a very, very good performance. Hickox is fine. So, I mean, what do we get? We got Paul Bunyan, thumbs up. Peter Grimes, thumbs down. The Rape of Lucretia, thumbs up. Billy Budd, thumbs down. The Turn of the Screw, 2 thumbs down. I mean, if I had the Scarlet Scarf of Shame for the Turn of the Screw, that would be on, but it's at the Cleaners or whatever. And A Midsummer Night's Dream, thumbs up. So that's, let's see, 1, 2, 3 good ones, and 1, 2, 3 sucky ones. Don't get this box. Don't waste your time. Get individual recordings of the operas in question. Just do it that way. Make your life easy. Make it simple, because there's no point on God's green earth to buy a big box of 6 operas, even at a budget price, even with no texts and translations or libretti, if half of them are terrible. I mean, even if they're not terrible, if they're not terrific, you got to have Britten's Own. If you have Britten's Own, you're in great shape. You can supplement Britten's Own with the Chandos series and the Naxos series if you want things in more modern sound that are absolutely superb. And so you can have multiple versions of all of these operas. And you can probably even find some singleton versions of the good ones in here, probably still sitting around somewhere. So that, my friends, is the story of the other Britten opera box. It is not, on the whole, a success, and not something that you need worry about. So keep on listening, folks. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.